Wait. Okay, I think I got this now. Nope. How the hell do I... Oh... Well, I'm an idiot. Welcome to a really retro review of Heart of Darkness. This isn't the first time I've reviewed a game from 1998. That video is currently my lowest viewed review. But don't let that put you off, this is going to be good, I promise. Heart of Darkness is a game about a young red-haired lad called Andy. Not to be confused with Andy from Toy Story, even though the entire game flooded me with Toy Story vibes. You start out with a 5-minute CGI cutscene giving you just the right amount of backstory that you'd want from a side-scrolling adventure game. You are introduced to the only 2 characters that are relevant at this point, and then you are swiftly thrust into the world of darkness in order to save one of these said characters, which is your precious doggo, Whiskey. Only to crash land and become stranded, forcing you to continue by foot. And this is where the adventure begins. Equipped with your surprisingly dangerous gun that this small child should definitely not be capable of creating, you're tasked with navigating your way through the world filled with traps, gross shadow monsters and other various obstacles. The story progresses following this theme and is delightfully whimsical. Look at me, mum. Whimsical. That's a big word. Whimsical! Although everything is told in a quite prompt manner, the story itself is actually quite interesting and humorous at times. Nothing is drawn out too long that risks losing interest from the player, but at the same time, despite everything being fairly straightforward, you're never left without any explanations or forced to make any assumptions. Every event that takes place during the gameplay is backed up by a cutscene and vice versa. The story is also told chronologically. Another big word there. Chronologic! No! We've already done that. There's no back and forth. Chronologically! For God's sake. There's no back and forth, it's simple, to the point and effective. It can be quite childish at times, but it's intended to be light-hearted and not particularly serious. Couple that with the dark theme of the game and it really does make for a nice recipe. The same applies for the characters. Surprisingly enough, the main character Andy is probably the least interesting out of the entire cast, and even then, he's perfectly suited for the role despite being very typically written and created with the 90s animation style in mind. You've also got Bucktooth Billy, Willy Knows Wayne, Bradis Becky, and Lord of the Thrones Game of the Rings. Don't kill me for that last one. The only way I can seem to describe the story to Heart of Darkness is Disney cheesy, literally, without the gross shadow monsters devouring your body from time to time. But yeah, excluding this, Heart of Darkness has a plot that could be convincingly created into a feature-length animation by Pixar. It's cheesy and somewhat predictable and has a certain charm that is portrayed mainly through the characters, who by the way are all voiced to a pretty decent standard despite being drowned out by the background music and other noises on occasion. The developers have simply nailed the story. It isn't the most interesting or best written story by any means, but it's perfectly suitable for the style of the game. Speaking of style, the graphics! Yes, I normally speak about the gameplay second, but the segue worked too well to speak about the graphics next, so that's what we're doing. Alright, cool. Okay, so graphics in 1998 were crappy, let's face it. It doesn't matter what way you swing it, this game and every game of that era is utter garbage in comparison to what my eyes are used to now, but with Heart of Darkness, a lot of this is simply down to the time and resolution it was made. The actual art direction itself is really nice, and to me it kind of looks like the love child between Broken Sword and Oddworld, but manages to take it a step further with the fluidity of the animation during active gameplay. It was rare at the time to see characters and NPCs on screen responding fluidly to movement rather than acting clunky. Unlike the control response, but we'll get to that later. Yeah, with the exception of the cutscenes, the game is technically in 2D, but I feel like it's part of the overall aesthetic of the game, and making it 3D would have taken away from this. The backdrops are all well designed and artistic, following the style created by the development team. That being said, it isn't all fantastic. Like I mentioned, the resolution is part of the game's downfall. It makes the characters and NPCs stick up like a sore thumb, in comparison to the smooth backdrops that can come across blurry and pixelated. However, this choice is what helped interactive movements look nice and fluid, but still, in terms of quality, is poor. The cutscenes are almost their own separate area to be judged. There are obviously some budget or hardware issues here, but if you look back at the cutscenes as still frames, they're actually pretty well crafted for the time. Nothing to write home about, but better than what a lot of other games were produced in 1998. My issue with them is the frame rate. Jesus, what happened here? It looks like it's being played like a stop motion animation. Roll out the Play-Doh, boys. Wallace and Gromit are coming to town. On the whole, I have mixed feelings about the graphics. I highly recommend the style and the art direction and the backdrops and the fluidity of the animation. They're all great, but you can tell the game had its limits. Overall it was nice, there are just too many drawbacks to warrant saying that they were amazing for its time. You know what definitely wasn't amazing for its time though? The gameplay! It's like Marmite. If you don't know what Marmite is, it's like Bovril. If you don't know what Bovril is, it's kind of like Vegemite. And if you don't know what Vegemite is, then seriously, where have you been living like the last forever? The gameplay is simple yet effective, a lot like the entire game. You don't have a lot to do in terms of interaction. You're either walking, running, jumping, crouching, climbing or attacking, pretty much what you'd expect from a side-scrolling adventure game. There's lots of small and intricate details that have gone into the gameplay, such as jumping on areas to cause destruction to the environment in order to progress, or completing puzzles to overcome obstacles. It's all part of a much bigger machine that makes this game as impressive as it is. Yet, I can't help but complain about one of the game's biggest flaws, and it's the controls. They have to be, without doubt, some of the clunkiest, heaviest and least responsive controls I've ever had to deal with. I'm not going to sugarcoat it. As much as I enjoyed this game and as innovative as it was for the time, the actual feeling of playing the game is tarnished by the controls, making some deaths feel unwarranted and, to be honest, unfair. Firing your gun was a nightmare as it could only be aimed in 7 precise locations, down not being one of them, which made hammering through hordes of shadow monsters an absolute nightmare as they had multiple ways to approach you, and if that approach didn't fit within your predefined aiming positions, you'd have to wait for the enemy to line up with one of these spots or stop firing because you can't shoot and move to a more appropriate spot and fire again, all whilst avoiding getting eaten alive. These restricted mechanics work in other games that are perhaps slower moving with their combat and give you more time to think, but when I'm being rushed by 20 demonic creatures, it just puts you at a huge disadvantage and is just aggravating. You do learn to adapt to it, but it doesn't make it any less frustrating. Generally I had mixed feelings about the gameplay. It had good ideas, but fitting it in with such an interactive environment clearly created its share of issues, and sometimes I felt let down in my attempts to survive by the controls and not my own actions. And I know it's typical of gamers to kind of blame their controls, but it was the controls, alright? So the summary, this usually how these things work, right? Summaries? Oh, I just hit my elbow on my chair. yeah, anyway, the summary. The story! 7 out of 10. Solid, simple and to the point. Nothing groundbreaking, but well executed and achieved what it set out to. The gameplay! No, that's not the right one. The graphics! 6 out of 10. Not the highest quality, but extra points awarded for a unique style and idea. The gameplay! 4 out of 10. A basic idea at its core with some nice ideas mixed in, let down by the unresponsive and heavy controls. The Heart and Darkness before Kingdom Hearts killed Heart and Darkness effect! Oh, that was a long one. 7 out of 10. A unique concept for its time, albeit quite cheesy. And overall it's a 6 out of 10. A really nice game with a fresh feel, could definitely benefit from some revamped controls and probably a little short for something that spans over 2 discs, but yeah, decent. Thanks for watching guys, this is another retro review. There's not any massive titles coming out at the moment, so I'm kind of just hoping something big's coming soon. I was going to do Mortal Kombat, but I don't think that game would really fit my review style. I think Days Gone is coming soon, that might be next. Yeah, also you can follow me on Twitter because social media is stuff. The people that made Broken Sword replied to one of my tweets today. That was probably the highlight of my day. I promise you I have a life. Thanks.